Welcome back for part 2 of my model and hobby room build. To continue framing out the walls, I need to secure the 2x6 studs to the structural beam. There's also this 4-inch pole I need to frame around. To accomplish that, I'll need to kick up my fastener game with some self-drilling screws meant to mount wood to steel. I cut the first 2x6 piece of lumber and created a bunch of pilot holes so I can begin securing the board to the steel beam. Using clamps, I hold the lumber in place, and once it's centered and ready to secure, I tighten the clamps so it won't budge. Oh my god, the amount of force it took to get the screws to go through the steel was so much more than I was prepared for. Working overhead like this with a power drill was exhausting, and it took a long time to get all these screws inserted. With that board in place, I finished this wall. Before moving on to the other side of the pole, I get the electrical wiring prepared for this wall. I use 20 amp Romex for the sump and 15 amp Romex for the regular power outlets. I put in a junction box to make it easier to channel the wire to all the lights and back to the switch. I needed to run a new line for the sump because the new wall will obviously prevent it from getting power. With some of the preliminary overhead wiring work done, I focus on the other side of the beam. This time, I place finishing nails to help line the board up to the beam faster. The other side had too much wiggling and it was hard to center without assistance. Using small nails to help guide the board into place made things go a lot smoother. I finally have the top beams in place, along with Romex pigtails to be dropped later on. The ceiling insulation and furring strips, which I am air quoting because they are 2x4s, are all in place. The ceiling strips are 16-inch spacing for drywall, and at 3.5 inches wide, I have plenty of room for mistakes. Using my trusty laser level, I get both the floor and the ceiling marked for the next wall. In go the base boards for the floor, and then the ceiling. And just like that, a new wall is born. I wasn't sure how to approach this main water intake, but I just went on gut and did what I had to do. Now for the fun part. The wall under the structural beam and between the sump and water heater is next. I pre-marked the ground for the door opening cutout based on my CAD drawings as shown in the previous video. With the floor marked, I apply construction adhesive to the ground, avoiding the door opening. I'll be removing the wood from within that area later on. With pilot holes drilled, I get the blasting ramset nails into the baseboard. With perfectly recessed mounting points, I can easily slide a pre-framed wall right into place. Here's some 2x4 framing behind the sump and a stretch of 2x6 wall, dividing the mechanical area from my future hobby room. In an attempt to create a mounting point to this post, I screw some scrap lumber to the top and bottom studs to align a new 2x6 board directly to the structural post. I slide in the 2x6 framing lumber and it fits just right. All that's left to do is use some of those self-tapping anchors on it. I leave them a little loose so I can fine-tune the angle of the board. Turns out I needed a lot of adjusting to make it straight. The lumber shifted quite a bit on that rounded edge of the post. Using a pressure-treated 2x6 on the other side because it's touching the ground, I simply repeat the process. This gap now needs to be walled off. My lack of experience and general knowledge of matters such as this has left me in a quandary. I can't come up with a flush solution taking into account the 1/2-inch drywall that is still to come, and creating secure mounting points for it with proper wood framing. So, I come to my senses and realize I can get away with whatever I want. It doesn't need to be perfect. I secure a couple pieces of pressure treated in there as the base and just build a big frame out of 2x6. I fit it into the opening and now I got something to work with. Thinking about how I want to run power to that filler wall I just put up, I decided to drill a pass-through hole to feed the 20 amp line and Ethernet cable. Why a 20 amp line? I'll be hooking up a PC as a workstation to this wall along with an internet jack. I certainly don't need 20 amps here, but I prefer it for all places I have a high-end PC or amplifier. I'll tuck these cables out of the way and move on to the soffit inside the room. Again, the laser level makes short work of lining up a flush surface. I use my stud finder and mark off all the points where I'll attach a new soffit frame. So yeah, I've been cutting every piece of lumber in the garage and lugging it down into the basement each time. Every step of this process has been taking forever. And with the wave of my magic wand, the soffit frame is ready to insert. But to my horror, it doesn't fit the way I had planned, requiring excessive finagling and swearing. Till eventually I got it in there, but needed to break out some large clamps I only use when building subwoofer boxes. It's starting to feel like I'm making progress. Up in that soffit, I'll be installing 2 more of those flush mount LED lights I showed you in the previous video. With the cross wall and soffit complete, I work on getting the last wall with the door opening completed. I bought myself a variable oscillating multi-tool just for this door opening. I used a handsaw on the previous doors I put up for the home theater build and swore to work smarter next time. I believe that's it for the framing. I cheated somewhat and used a 250-foot spool of 20 amp wire I had left over from the home theater installation instead of buying more 15 amp wire. Technically, I think it's okay to start off with 14-2 wire on a 15 amp line, then use 12-2 later on, just not the other way around. I manually marked each gang box and cable what the breaker box is set for, in case future generations come along one day thinking it's actually done correctly. To speed things up, I set the laser level to the height above the countertop where I want the outlets, then mark all the studs. I focus on mounting all the gang boxes and wiring them up for power. Before I forget, I used the laser level to mark the locations of the ceiling lights and speakers onto the floor. This way, once the drywall ceiling is up, I can transfer these marks up and know where to cut the holes. I have a 2-channel speaker jack on the wall that will feed the wires to the ceiling speakers. I used some leftover in-wall speaker cable from the home theater build and there was just barely enough to make it. Above are all the LED light dongles ready to be plugged in once the ceiling is in and the holes are cut. Because of the odd way I installed the framing on the ceiling, I need to get this face of drywall installed before getting the ceiling panels up. Again, I clearly made a mistake here somewhere. Before every piece of drywall goes up, I apply a layer of construction adhesive. I bought this circle cutter to help with the ceiling lights. Then, I set the circle cutter using the template provided with the lights. Here, I prepare the soffit with the marks needed to cut out the first holes for the LED lighting. I feel better about that tool now that I've used it. Moving on to the remainder of the gang boxes and wiring, I go ahead and finish that in preparation for the insulation and drywall. That wraps up part 2 of this model and hobby room build. Please keep an eye out for part 3 and thanks for watching.